Hello, my name is Josh Smith, and you are here to learn all about the fun and interesting world of quality control and hopefully managing some fungal and bacterial risks. So, as I said, my name is Josh Smith. I'm the CEO and Chief Scientist of Premium CBD Labs. We are currently located in Madison, Wisconsin. Very, very sunny weather here in late March. We had our snowstorm yesterday, so it's all good. I finished my graduate degree in clinical microbiology at University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. I spent a little over a decade in pharmaceutical research, new drug development, and I may not be from Canada, but I prefer ice hockey and beer that I can chew. So, enough about me. Unless anybody else wants to talk about long walks on the beach. As we all know, cannabis is a major growing industry, whether you want to talk about medical, recreational, or hemp. It is growing rapidly, wildly every day. CBD is in the news everywhere. And even now we have people, especially with this recent coronavirus outbreak, trying to jump in and jump on the bandwagon with CBD. So it's not just in the United States, but all over the world, the cannabis market is increasing rapidly. And as you can see, these numbers here are from MJ Biz, which is a very nice publication. But for 2020, we're expected to have between 55 and $66 billion for total economic impact to the United States. And it's not going anywhere. It's only going higher. As we look in the next couple of years, that number is just going to be astounding. But since all of us are pretty much in the cannabis space, we all know that. And one of the biggest things about the cannabis industry and really any growing industry is with growth comes growing pains. We've been having, you get new government regulations, you get a black market, as California can attest to. Problems with the black market really hinder your legal market. You get snake oil salesmen, shady businessmen that are trying to either scam people and sell them something that's just vegetable oil, or you're trying to sell them on a product that you claim can do things that it can't. I believe the FDA even recently sent out some nasty letters and smackdowns to a few companies over claims that CBD can do certain things. And then a little more of a focus for this talk is businesses that are unprepared for growth or what's coming. Mostly regulation and getting their processes up to speed. So, as I said, what does that mean for us? We get to quality control. Now, what does quality control actually mean? Depending on your area of expertise, that can mean a lot of different things. But for us, really, the one thing that kind of solidifies and brings everything together is, you're consistent. So your product, your process, it's going to be the same across the board. You're clean. Your facilities, your products, you're not introducing anything. You're not causing contamination. And, safety for yourself, your employees, and for the general public. To help with your consistency, this is where we start talking about standard operating procedures. Everything also, you get into what companies are you ordering from? Are they registered? Are they reputable? Are they doing proper QA/QC on themselves? Are they ISO accredited? Are you batch number and lot number recording for your own chemicals and processes? And, how are you tracking when you do order chemicals, when you do order supplies, how are you testing to make sure that there wasn't a bad batch from the supplier? Cleanliness, are you doing cleaning? Sometimes it's just as simple as, are you cleaning your stuff? Are you cleaning your equipment? Are you cleaning your facility? How are you doing that? I mean, is it appropriate? For example, in the lab, your bench tops, what are they made out of? Some of those materials are very porous, and you can have bacterial and fungal spores, bacterial contamination, that they can live in those pores. And no matter what kind of cleaning you do, it's not going to really do much. Or if you say you have a certain bench top and then you use a different cleaning product than you normally would, and it eats microscopic holes into that bench top. So really making sure you're using the right products. And then also how often. I mean, if you're doing something once a month, is that going to do much? Not really. And then are you recording that? Because just like in the AHR world, if it's not written down, it does not exist. So really make sure you're logging all of your processes and your cleaning and all of that, training, etc. And then we get to safety. So this is for yourself, your employees mostly, but it also comes down to what you're putting out and your customers. But are your employees wearing the proper personal protective equipment, PPE? Do they understand the risks? This is where, are they giving them the proper training to do certain things? And are they correctly following those protocols and logging them? That's the big one. Not so much you get the person who's been doing something for 20 years a certain way and it's wrong. Now you have trained them and said they're doing things a certain way, but are they? Like old manufacturing machine shops that I grew up working in, how many of those people actually wear their safety glasses when they should, or wear their earplugs when they should? In the lab, you've got the organic solvent wastes, particularly in your to extract your cannabinoids. Are people wearing their gloves? Are they wearing their eyeglasses? Are they doing things in a hood? Are they doing things in a biosafety cabinet? All of that comes into play in this. But the nice part about all of this is that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. A lot of people seem to think that cannabis and the cannabis industry is something brand new. While the product is new, really the overall processes are not. So there's a lot of resources out there that we can get to, that we can find, where this has already been done and available. For example, ISO accreditation for whether it's 9001, whether it's 17025, if you're a lab. I mean, all of those things are there already. That's your SOPs, your quality control manuals. You have auditors and contractors and people that can help you with that. If you're an extraction facility, manufacturer, GMP. If you're a lab, GLP. That's good manufacturing practices and good laboratory practices. I know GMP facilities are expensive to create. They take a long time, get the audits, get the paperwork, get the HR. But there's not going to be less federal regulation in this industry. It's not going away. The more it gets standardized, the more things go, the more regulations we're going to have. And to be honest, just like in every other industry, especially in, say, the food industry, as I have in point 3 here, the FDA already has food grade lab certifications, food grade kitchen certifications. That's what you need to be going for. It's only going to be a matter of time before you're forced to. So now is the time to get ahead of the curve and get working towards that, because eventually you'll have to, and you'll already have the auditors in place. You already have the process kind of taken care of. It'll be cheaper and faster for you to get your products while everyone else is waiting probably 1 to 2 years minimum. And then also, for growers, there's already USDA programs out there for various certifications. That these are all great resources, especially the FDA has a great small business resources. While they can sometimes be a pain to work with, as most government agencies can be, their online portal is actually very good at getting through and giving you the information you need and showing you the exceptions that you can apply for. Now to break this down a little more, again, quality control means different things for different industries. If you're a grower or a farmer, both indoor and outdoor, you've got different things to think about as pertains to your fungal and bacterial risks and your quality control in your growing season, your harvest, and your storage and drying. Same thing with manufacturing production facilities. You have your intake and your storage while you're waiting to process your material. Then you have the actual processing. And then arguably one of your major steps would be the bottling and packaging. For labs, you have your sample shipping. How does it get to the lab? What do you do with your intake? What do you do with your processing? And then storage and disposal. We won't talk too much about those because most labs have to be 17025 accredited or will be soon. And that pretty much is covered in a lot of that. For growers, we'll start with your growing seasons. So if you are sourcing, storing, and germinating your seed, how are you doing that? How are you storing your seed? A lot of seed comes with nice fungal contamination to begin with. So why a lot of the commercial seed is fungicide sprayed. We do seed germination testing in the lab, and a good chunk of these seeds that come through usually have mold on them. For most people, that isn't a big deal, but when you're doing a large quantities of seed, are your workers protected for that? Are they wearing respirators or masks? Because if you're tossing around all that dust that gets up in the air, then you've got fungal infections. In your grow houses, in your potting media. So if you're growing hydroponically indoors, your lines, your potting soil, how are you cleaning that? Yes, it sounds dumb to say clean potting material, and you want microbes in that potting material, but are you checking it every once in a while? Are you looking to see if there's anything in there that shouldn't be? What are you doing with your water lines? Are you flushing them occasionally? Your nutrient lines, are they being cleaned out? What kind of frequency? You're going to get some kind of fungal and algal bloom in there eventually if you're not careful, but you can also get some really nasty bacteria growing in those as well. And once you get outdoors for mid to late season for most of those guys, again, your irrigation tanks and lines. What are you doing to keep those clean? Pests up in Wisconsin for hemp, we had the Eurasian hemp borer, which brought a lot of fungal disease with it. If you have too much rain or if you have a drought, all these things can cause fungal and bacterial, blooms and infections that if you're not careful, you can actually cause harm to people that are working. And really any kind of stress to these plants and plants in general can cause these things. When you're harvesting your equipment, a lot of that harvesting equipment, granted you can't do a lot by machine yet, but if you're doing seed, there's a lot of dust that's popped up. And, especially for the seed, then you also have fire issues, but that's a whole other thing altogether. Once you actually harvest it, though, how long before it gets to your storage location? What is your storage location like? What is your storage facility made out of? What are the conditions in that storage location? Your employees, what are they doing? How are they taking care of things? Are they washing their hands? Are they sick on site? When they're cutting things, are they using properly cleaned equipment? For example, if you're gardening, it's not huge because you're harvesting a lot of this stuff, but if you trim plants without cleaning your equipment or sanitizing your shears, you can easily spread fungal and bacterial diseases between plants, which will hurt your crop yield and also lead to infection. And then, weather. What's your climate like? Because that will change everything around. And while you can't change the climate, it definitely needs to be put into or addressed so that you can actually modify your other, like your storage location, your drying location. So when you do begin to go drying and store your samples, what's the environmental controls for your location? Is this just a shack that is no electricity and you're just hanging things, drying things from there? Is it temperature controlled, humidity controlled, etc.? How long are you going to be keeping the stuff there? Is it going to be a week or two until you get things dried down and then you send them off to a facility? Are you sending them to a facility right away? Or are you planning on winterizing this stuff? It all needs to be taken into account. And just as much, how much? Are you doing 6 acres, 10 acres? Or is this a 10 plant setup that you're doing a test run on? That will change all of the other quality control and storage issues. And then also the condition of your crop. When you harvest, is there a patch that's moldy, that's infected, that's diseased? What are you doing with that? Are you keeping that separate and trying to actually get something out of it? Are you quarantining it when you bring it in? Or are you just mixing it in with the general population and hoping when you dry it out that it'll take care of itself? Are you just throwing it out? Even burning it, sometimes spores can get kicked up. Fungal spores can dislodge in the heat, in the air from the heat, and then spread around your drying room. What is your airflow like? All of these things come into play. So what exactly does that mean? Well, or what can you have? What kind of problems can you have? I'm going to focus a little more on some of the more human pathogens, but there are a lot of just general plants and fungal pathogens that aren't even discussed on here and that we just don't have time to go through. So if you're not following things, if you're not putting these plans into place, anthrax, Bacillus anthracis, it's actually a very common soil pathogen. If you, give a trained microbiologist some aluminum foil on a baked potato, you can actually isolate pure cultures of anthrax in about an hour and a half. Now, no, that doesn't mean that, you got to watch people put people on watch lists, but you can actually, as a way to culture this, it's actually a very easy way. But it's also been an agricultural infection problem for a very long time. Tends to be livestock, but anywhere that you're growing stuff, what kind of fertilizer are you using? Are you using manure? Do you have livestock on the property? This is in the soil, so it can be part of the area. As I mentioned before and brought up actually in 2 slides, the irrigation lines, indoor, outdoor, Legionella pneumophila also causes Legionnaire's disease. There was actually somebody in the industry that caught this from their potting soil in an indoor grow house last year, I believe. This is also very, very, very common in sprinkler lines that are not flushed regularly. So is this coming in your irrigation lines? How often are you cleaning them? Because it loves stagnant water. So if you are not cycling that water really fast, and if it's sitting for quite a while, this is a very, very big possibility. And this guy sneaks up on you. It does not culture well. You have to look specifically for it. And it isn't the frontline antibiotics are not great for it. They'll work occasionally, but you can go everywhere from coughing to full-on organ failure and shutdown. And it takes about 3 to 4 weeks, or can anyways. So a fungal version of all of these good things, mucormycosis, you've got several different versions of it, flavors, and Fusarium is one of the species that causes it. There's also a few other ones, but these are all pretty common soil environmental fungi. It's not nice, and while it does tend to be more for immunocompromised patients, it doesn't help that if you're even normally healthy. And everybody knows about Aspergillus, but our fun black, quote, black mold. And this is the one that most people actually test for when they say mycotoxins or fungal cultures. Again, here's Fusarium. It can also cause its own special cases of infection. Again, immune-compromised people. On the manufacturing and processing side, what are some areas that you should be looking at to help with? Well, when your product comes in, has the farmer had it tested? How did the farmer actually take care of their stuff? You really need to watch where your farmers, you got to trust them. Are they doing things properly? Are they drying properly? Because that much organic material in a wet area is just, as most of you well know, that's a lovely, lovely playground for all kinds of mold. When you're building a storage warehouse or your facility, you're going to want to look at your humidity and temperature for inside. If those fluctuate even, you can cause problems. Microclimates in specific warehouses can be a major problem. The type of construction materials used for your floors, for your shelves, for your buildings. Is it wood? Is it stainless steel? Is it aluminum? Is it, go down the list. How easy is it for you to clean is really where I'm getting at with this. And then again, airflow. Good airflow is essential if you want to store anything for a long term and avoid bacterial and fungal contamination. How are those samples stored? What are your containers like? Are they airtight? Is this vacuum sealed? Is this stuck in bales, just stuck on shelves? What's the lighting in your facility? Not only are they showing light breaks down CBD, CBDA, that kind of thing, but if you have a dark area with bad airflow and you have a microclimate of decaying plant material, you have a chance of your entire storage facility going up with fungal infection or fungal contamination. You got to toss out whole batches. That's not a good thing. And your personnel. How are your employees handling the material? Are they clean? Are they bringing in anything from outside? Or do you have them wearing lab coats or, things specifically for your facility? A lot of places will have sticky mats or bleach mats. How your employees take care of themselves and reduce the cross-contamination risk so that even if you do have a region of your facility that gets a contamination problem, you're not going to spread it to the rest of your facility and you can contain it. When you begin processing, say you're taking in bulk biomass that's dried, you load everything up into that gigantic grinder. Well, there's a good chance, even as much as you try to, there's going to be fungal spores on some of that. So get your employees to start wearing respirators if they're not already. PPE is huge for this. Plus, be careful that when you're putting this stuff into a room, you want to make sure that it's in a room that you can clean easily and the equipment you're cleaning on a very, very regular basis. So something that if it's stainless steel, bleach is always good. Ammoniated quetzal is always very nice. There's lots of fungal and bacterial decontamination sprays you can get. But if you're at every step of your process, if you get that contaminated, everything downstream of that gets contaminated. So every batch afterwards until you catch it is contaminated. So that also then can be problems for you and your employees health-wise. But as from a product standpoint, you don't want to screw up batches and batches and batches a day with cross-contamination. So not only do you have to pull down your equipment, take it apart, clean it, bring it back up, make sure it's spec'd, and that takes anywhere from only half a day to 3 days, depending on your equipment. But everything that you've run through, you have to then test and most likely throw out. This is so the manufacturing, bottling, and packaging step is arguably one of your bigger quality control risk areas for fungal and bacterial infection and contamination. All of your equipment and machinery needs to be sanitized. I mean, general FDA guidelines are you need to be doing batch testing and lot testing for all of your products, just for human safety wise. But this is where you get into major recalls from other products and other industries, and you really need to be on your A game. Make sure everything is clean, make sure everything is taken care of. What are your bottles are you using? Are they sterilized beforehand? Are you using Mylar packaging? Are they clear bottles? Are they amber bottles? Are they, your packaging? Really, really, really keep an eye on your processes here. Some of the things that can come up, especially in your bottling packaging, we all know about E. coli, but in particular, everyone hears about 0157H7, which is what tends to be your food poisoning. There are also a large number of other ones that cause disease, and there's also a large number that does not. But you're going to get this from improperly hand washing, cross-contamination with fertilizers, and other areas. Staph aureus, this is pretty common everywhere. I believe up to 25% of the people are already colonized with it. And it's in your nose, your armpits, tends to be your crotch, and I cannot remember off the top of my head where the other one is. But we've all heard about staph infections, MRSA infections. This can also cause food poisoning. So again, with bottling and packaging, keep an eye on it. Clostridium C. diff, you've probably heard about. Very, very nasty antibiotic resistant anaerobic. So it doesn't like oxygen. This is one of the worries, is that it is in your oil bottles, because oil does not really like to transfer oxygen. So at the bottom of your oil bottles, anybody who's canned food knows about Clostridium botulinum or Botox is the isolated toxin from C. botulinum. And perfringens, Clostridium perfringens is another one. These are all anaerobes, and again, they're pretty common everywhere. So it's something to keep an eye on. And more for the extraction facilities themselves, Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Now, this guy, it's a gram-negative aerobic rod that tends to be in the environment a lot. If you go to a water fountain and you see that blue crud on the water fountain, that usually is Pseudomonas. It releases a dye or a pigment that can turn that blue. But these guys are extremely hardy. I personally have seen them growing and thriving in 5% ammoniated quetzal on a lab bench. So they can adapt. They also like to live in corners and crusts and creases. So when you're cleaning out your equipment, this is one of the things that you would be screening for in your own internal QA/QC. So after all of that, what can you do about all this stuff? I gave you the scary bacteria and fungi. Really, you're looking at having standard operating procedures. You're looking at having qualified vendors and making sure your supplies are the same. You want to have all the documentation with those supplies. You want to make sure that your employees are wearing the correct equipment or PPE. So are they wearing gloves for things to reduce the contamination issues that you have? Are you using the proper supplies for the situation? Are you cleaning your utensils in the correct bit? Do you have an autoclave? Are you using the correct cleaner for the correct surface? Are your, certain percentages of bleach will not kill off bacterial and fungal spores, but it'll kill off live bacteria. Hand sanitizer does not kill bacterial spores, does not kill fungal spores. And to be honest, a lot of viruses it doesn't actually take care of either. So you would, need to wash your hands. But really, there are so many avenues to watch for that you need to take care of and really use the right tools. And as I said before, if you don't write it down, if you don't log it, it didn't happen. So keeping track of these things so that when, you might say you see a little bit of a problem with, you might have had a little bacterial infection about 6 months ago. Now it's starting to pop up a lot more. You can then kind of trace back and say, maybe it's from this supplier, or maybe we have a reservoir somewhere in our facility that this is coming from, or maybe it's a specific individual who doesn't seem to want to wash their hands. It really, really helps you keep track and address things down the road. And having a plan to address things. So what will you do if you have a contamination problem? Do you have a plan for that? As long as you have a plan, at least it's a start. It'll mitigate most of the things. How are you going to address keeping things from coming into your facility? How are you going to keep your drying set up so that anybody who comes in, any employee that comes in, knows how to do things right away, and then training them on it? So really, there's a lot more you can go into, and there's a lot of areas that can be delved into. But the biggest thing is just having a plan, writing it down, and using the correct tool for the occasion. It sounds really simple when you say it that way, but in reality, that's the way a lot of it comes down to. So I guess that's pretty much all I have. If anybody has any questions, feel free to let me know, and I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Thanks.